This dude is not American. I cannot stand fucking foreigners talking about American politics. Like, oh my God.
They're still stuck in what we've been experiencing over the last 4 years, which is all of this DEI virtue signaling, and they've got their heads stuck up their asses.
Nothing they have done is genius level.
I think Russia's proven they can take the beating they've been taking, and they're going to continue to take. They're assaulting Ukrainian positions in golf carts.
I mean, this is ridiculous to say that he can just, barge his way out through the government and then go on Twitter with all this half-baked bullshit and expect us to just be like, oh, he wasn't right on that one, he'll get him next time or whatever. It's like, no, we don't like you. Hi everybody, this is John Koenig back with Real Redder News, episode 41. If you'd like to help us out and support, please watch the whole video and leave a comment. Thank you very much. This week, I want to talk about why I am the way I am and why I feel the way I do about politicians. Not talking about generals this week. I asked good friend Marie last week if she had any feedback about the show. First thing she mentioned was she wanted me to stop saying how everybody was sucking the big one, which I think I can do. I'll start editing my language a little bit, which I think is a reasonable feedback point. Other feedback point, the main issue that she had in responding to what my episode last week was, why am I trying to topple Elon, and so on and so forth. And then she proceeded along that feedback line here. So I'm using that feedback to talk about why I am the way I am and also how I feel about Elon and Donald Trump, bearing in mind that these dude won by not that much. I mean, it's not like this was some landslide victory here, and Elon, I'll get into it, but this dude is not American. I cannot stand fucking foreigners talking about American politics. Like, oh my God, are you serious? His stupid foreign accent talking about the American government is insane. I don't know how anybody wants to hear that shit. Go back to talking about rockets and your little electric cars and shit. This person wasn't a veteran. They've never sacrificed anything for our country. He didn't even grow up here. This is not the person, okay? So starting from that place, let me get into it. I understand why my friends and other people think that I might be super pro-Trump because I'm a white guy and I was in the army and I was a ranger, and most rangers, conservative. And I mean, obviously I do have conservative political opinions about a lot of things, but I'm an independent type person. Obviously, Joe Biden was terrible. There was nothing good about the Biden administration. I can't even think of one positive thing that this guy did. I mean, the Kabul thing, and then the CHIPS Act, and just him sleeping away the whole time and not reacting to anything. I just really think that it was bad time, and Kamala honestly maybe might have been worse. I have no idea because she's disingenuous and wouldn't tell us what she really thinks. So I'm very glad that those two people are gone, hopefully forever. With regard to Trump, I mean, obviously I agree with some of the stuff that he says and does, not all of it. I mean, nobody agrees with all of everything for anybody, but he's not a good person. He's a rich kid. He wasn't in the military. Doesn't treat women well. He's not respectful of people, and he is a fighter, and he is a leader in a way, and he's good at marketing and branding, and he's found this way of doing this smash mouth American politics. I also can't blame him totally. The Democrats have refused to work with him even since the first day. They've always been trying to kill him, and there's no détente. I really think that these Democrats should calm down and work with him and try to get some of their ideas in, find some common ground, work on the important things. I mean, USAID and the DEI stuff and, these other education and these other issues are minor issues. You have to understand that Trump is just using these unpopular liberal programs and initiatives and ways of spending money in order to rile up his people and to piss off the Democrats. And they're taking the bait. Everyone can see it. They look ridiculous. I mean, they're not even cutting that much, from the government. And it's like, just let him do what he's going to do. And then once he's done with it, then argue about it. But, trying to just go out there every day with these ridiculous rallies, they just videotape you, cursing and whining and, lamenting your lack of power at these, outdoor rallies or whatever. And they use it against you. They just play it on Fox News all night long. They get the people in the retirement home all whipped up, and it just makes Trump more and more popular. I mean, he's at his highest popularity ever right now, and a lot of that is just because the Democrats don't have good leaders in charge. They don't have any kind of effective strategy. I mean, one of my friends recently was saying how Hakeem Jeffries wasn't doing enough against Trump, but it's like, in my opinion, I think Hakeem Jeffries is the most reasonable, calm Democrat out there. He looks very, very reasonable. He looks like he's ready to work with Trump and the Republicans when the time comes, when things need to be worked on, important things, not USAID or these other little things. And I'm not saying that everybody should follow him, but first off, they need new leaders. The leaders that they've got are failures. They might be good at raising money. They might be popular with extremists, but they got to go. I said that in the last show. I'd always wondered about how Trump was going to come back from, and even in a second term, what he was going to do that was going to be different in his first term. I mean, he is a TV show guy. He's an entertainer, essentially, and he does a pretty good job of that sometimes. But he had this Trump, season 1, which was him basically resisting the Russia stuff and doing whatever it is he was working on in his first term. Now it's kind of like Trump's season 2, and he had to come up with something different. He's got new people, so you've got like a new cast. He's got a new, strategy. Like, it's like a new season, right? And he's doing a ton of executive orders. He's doing them fast and furious. It's like flood the zone type strategy they've got going on. And it seems to be working so far, but what nobody is realizing is he can't do that much with executive orders. He can't fire that many people from the government. That's why they put out the resignation email and stuff, because they know they can't fire most of these people with no reason. There are unions that represent these people, right? So, and honestly, there's not that much to be cut from the government anyways. Yeah, there's fraud, waste, and abuse. I mean, that's just a political term that they're labeling everything they don't like with. Everything's fraud, waste, and abuse. DEI is fraud, waste, and abuse. There's a lot of people in the country that don't think DEI workers are fraud, waste, and abuse. You know what I mean? It's like a perspective and what frame you're coming from. And it's fine. You got the power, like cut it or whatever, and they characterize it as fraud, waste, and abuse. But there's just so much that they're doing that shows that they don't actually care about fraud, waste, and abuse. Like, if you cared about fraud, waste, and abuse, you wouldn't fire inspectors general, who their whole job is to look for fraud, waste, and abuse on a professional basis. You wouldn't put out mass resignation letters to the CIA and all over the government, because you're basically saying anybody who wants to quit can quit. I mean, that's not fraud, waste, and abuse. That's just like reducing the force, trying to save money. You're never going to save that much money anyway. I mean, you can reduce the force, restructure or whatever. That's fine, but you do it in a thoughtful manner, not just like, who wants to quit? That's stupid. The idea that Elon Musk and all these kids and all these random acolytes that he's gathered around him are these like geniuses that are remodeling the whole government. Nothing they have done is genius level. Like, honestly, if you were a smart, tactical person, you would hire professional auditors and do a professional audit and then come up with a strategic plan of what to do, of how to save money, of who to fire, who not to fire. You don't just fire all the new people, all the probationary people. Like, you don't even know who these people are. They probably don't make that much money anyway. And you don't know who they are, you know what the performance is, you don't know what job they're doing. You're just firing as many people as you can because you want to make it hurt and you want to make a headline for the news. You want to get attention on Twitter, which is pathetic, attention whore behavior. And, you know, you're just like mining the government. Like, oh, we wasted $300,000, you know, which is nothing. In the federal government budget, that's nothing. Like, the amounts of money that they're coming up with is functionally nothing. Now, in Medicaid and in Social Security, the fraud, yeah, I mean, if they can get into that, there might be some real money there, but that's going to take some time. There's laws and regulations in place. It's not easy to do. People try to tackle it before, but all they're doing is just looking for these odd situations in the government, which if you're familiar with the government, you know these situations exist, like the mine shaft that all the paperwork has to go down. But realistically, from a strategic point of view, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit if all the paper is going in little boxes and down some mine shaft or not? I mean, it's not great. It's probably like a little bit of a waste of money, but it's not material, right? And the other main issue is that there's no crisis. There's no national emergency. It's like a manufactured crisis. Why all this has to be done like that. Why Elon Musk has to be sleeping on the floor of the office every night. Like when Elon Musk was doing Tesla or doing SpaceX, it was like SpaceX, they got one more rocket. You know, if that rocket doesn't go off and without a hitch, then or doesn't meet the timeline that's necessary, the company's gonna run out of money, everybody loses their jobs, and it's over. It's endgame. With Tesla, if they didn't meet their production targets, if they didn't get the cost of the cars down or whatever, it doesn't work. It's over. Everyone loses their money. We don't have a situation like that here. There's no reason to be running around with your hair on fire, firing all the interns, trying to save money when you're not even going to be able to save that much money anyway. This whole fraud, waste, and abuse thing, even it's emotional, and yes, nobody supports it if it's actual fraud, waste, and abuse, but you're just slapping the label on anything that you can find that you don't like, and then trying to say, oh, I saved you so much money, when you're just going to spend it on something else anyway. You know, you're just reapportioning the people's money in the direction that you want it to go, which is what every politician does. And you're just trying to like take out retribution on this bureaucratic state, which I get the bureaucratic state has gotten overgrown and so on and so forth, but it's like he's obviously shown that he's coming for payback, and all these things are getting conflated together. It's very effective, but I mean, it's classic propaganda. It's classic disinformation, like the condoms for Gaza. Like, how fucking stupid are you? You know what I mean? And then he's in the Oval Office. He gets humiliated by this woman reporter who's like, these condoms didn't go to Gaza or whatever. And then he's just backtracking, and he's like, I don't think we should send condoms anywhere. You know, they have AIDS, dude. And then he's like, oh, I'm not going to bat 1,000. You know, not everything that I say is going to be right. Well, it's like, how can we trust anything you say if, you know, you're not planning on batting 1,000? You know what I mean? You're in the fucking government. You know, if he was working in Tesla and someone that worked for him came up with some nonsense and fed it to him, he would fire him. If he, as the CEO, spat out some nonsense to the investors and they found out about it, you know, that would hurt the stock price of the company, or maybe the stockholders would vote him out. I mean, this is ridiculous to say that he can just, you know, barge his way out through the government and then go on Twitter with all this half-baked bullshit and expect us to just be like, oh, he wasn't right on that one, he'll get him next time or whatever. It's like, no, we don't like you. Elon Musk is not popular. He's got no charisma. He exploited his young son in the Oval Office for no good reason, just to humanize himself because he's a human robot that nobody likes. And Trump's just using him. He's just so pathetic that he doesn't understand that. I mean, it's not going to last forever, thank God, but I'm not going to overreact about it, and I'm going to wait and see what happens. I can already see what's happening, but I want to wait and see what happens to make my personal final opinion. And I agree with some of it, obviously, too. But there's no reason for the Democrats and everyone to go crazy because the judges are going to slow it down. Anytime they do one of these executive orders or whatever, they just file a lawsuit. One of the judges, you know, stops it. This is what happens all the time. Like, everybody just needs to chill out. Some people are going to get fired. This stuff happens. It's a new president. It's a new administration. And they lost the election so bad that the Republicans took both houses. You know, plus they got the Supreme Court from back before. I mean, you got to expect some of this stuff. So it's not going to be too bad. What we really need to be worried about is AI and wars coming up, either if they decide to attack Iran or they decide to attack China, or what happens with the end of this Russia thing, because we do not need to be fighting any of these ridiculous wars. I mean, that's where we spend the most money. You want to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, is all the money we've been sending to Ukraine. All right, now it's time to talk about AI with my new friend, Charles Sears, Army veteran, former law enforcement, and entrepreneur author. Charles, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thanks for that. That did the most of it. That did the hard stuff. But yeah, I did 11 years in the Army National Guard, I did 5 years as a deputy sheriff, and recently, last year, published a few books, mostly on psychology and human behavior. Own a marketing agency, an IT company, and now we're breaking into the AI world. So fun stuff.
Awesome. Charles is interested in AI just like I am. I also, my friend Ron, who was on 2 shows ago. So we're going to talk about some AI news. Some of my friends are more military focused, or like don't really interested in AI that much, but AI is the most important technology in the history of humans, and it's super important for the military, not to mention the fate of nations here. So it's a critical time in human history, critical for all of us. It's honestly a privilege that we're all alive during this time. We get to kind of see it happen here. So good things to talk about. So this week, one of the interesting things was the Paris AI Summit, which is the biggest summit of nations so far. It was hosted obviously in France by Macron. Trump sent Vice President JD Vance. So we've got a lot to talk about. JD Vance gave his talk at the end of the summit. So I will not go first. I'll let Charles go first. It's on his first show here. So Charles, what did you think about JD Vance's speech?
Yeah, well, I liked it, and I definitely caught the highlights. And I'm in agreement with JD on that, on what he said, which is essentially that overregulation is going to stifle development of AI. And while I think that there are like some risks that we should at least be wary of, I'm not sure that it's anything that we're going to be able to stop at this point. And I think that open markets lead to better innovation and ultimately better outcomes.
Was JD talking about open source? I didn't remember him talking about that.
I don't remember him talking about open source so much, but he was talking about regulation. And when he's talking about regulation, a lot of what these summits and these international accords try to do is get everyone to come into an agreement. And, you could call it, use different words, right? But this is ultimately, it's kind of like a global initiative or a one world order type agreement. And I think that's ultimately why the US and the UK didn't agree. Didn't sign these accords, because when really there's not a lot of education on what these things can do. And definitely the people at those summits, at least in the government, are not well prepared to be signing anything related to regulation, because they really don't know what's going on.
But they brought all their nerds with them. So, I mean,
yeah.
It's not like they're out there on their own.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have an idea for next week where I want to do like a report card for Trump, and I'm going to give like on the different issues, and I'll just preview it. But basically on AI, I think he's got like an A-. I think I like the deregulation. This like tracks with all this stuff. They hate their regulations. They deregulated all the environmental stuff so we'll talk about it later, they get the power plants online, and they're pulling back all the AI safety stuff. And Biden was all about the AI safety stuff. He was afraid of AI. He was slowing it down. He had all these policy idiots, writing all this shit. He put all these executive orders in, even at the end of his administration, after Kamala had lost, and Trump like wiped them all, and whatever. So fuck Biden on that. But Trump obviously is like full bore on it. He sees it as an opportunity. He sees it as an opportunity for America to be great. I like that. The thing I don't like is I don't see. This is unrelated to this, but with regard to Trump, like I don't see leadership in the Pentagon changing. I don't think Pete Hegseth is somebody that's focused on AI or someone that can drive this. I haven't seen them have like a military AI czar, because it's a little bit different than civilian, and they're kind of relying on these, Palantir and Anduril and stuff like that. So that was, I'll just like preview that. I generally think they're doing pretty well. I personally don't like JD Vance. I think he has zero charisma. I think he was personally a flop. Like you could just see in the room. I mean, Macron was trying to be as polite to him as possible. He's a nice, elegant French man or whatever. Sure. But like, everybody thought he was basically a buffoon up there. None of his jokes landed. I know people are not English speakers and it's tough in like international crowd like that, but it was kind of like a cowboy speech over there. Obviously he just talked about safety. Like you said, US, UK didn't sign. China did sign, but they'll never follow anything anyway, right? And like,
well, that's the deal. Is a lot of this is all, in my opinion, is virtue signaling. These people are just saying, hey, we'll do these things. And ultimately, some of these countries are just looking at that as an advantage. Hey, if I can get you to agree to not do A, B, and C, then now I know exactly where I'm going to find an unfair advantage. And we already know that China uses tactics that are malicious, major state actors in hacking and cybersecurity issues. And some would even say that I would say that we're in effectively what could be considered like a Cold War or an arms race in this era of AI. So that's how I look at it.
I understand they're hackers, but we hack them too, and we're the
Oh,
best
sure.
hackers in the world. So I mean,
Sure, yeah.
it's kind of like pot kettle black. But with regard to safety, both U.S. and China don't care about safety. We used to care about safety with Biden and that, but like that's gone now, right? Like we're both like off to the races, trying to get to AGI. We know that it's a winner take all game here.
Right.
Europe is in the middle. Europe was, too regulated, too slow. Their energy regulations were they don't have as much energy as we do. So they were like hopelessly behind. And up until China DeepSeek came out, they thought that they were never going to catch up to Americans. We have a monopoly on the chips, and that we were just going to bully them, right? Which,
Sure.
as long as we give them the AI, we're their allies generally. Like America's not going to come invade Europe or whatever. But, they're still a little suspicious of us. Now that Trump's in there and Trump's doing all this crazy shit, like they don't know if they can count on us anymore. So they want to hedge their bets. So they're like playing footsie a little bit with China. They're them and Global South. So it's like the rest of the world that's not USA or China. And China is trying to develop AI chips that can compete with NVIDIA, domestically produce them. And now that China brought this DeepSeek model that's more efficient and so on, the Europeans are like, oh shit, maybe we shouldn't write China off. We can play off. Now the Europeans are kind of like, I don't know, like between the two of us, like play the middle between us. They don't know which side to like throw in with. And that's kind of tough because if we have Europe on our side, we can compete with China, right? If we have the whole world, eventually we'll roll China. If we have Europe, we'll probably be competing. But if we don't have anyone else, like eventually China's going to roll us unless we like have a breakout over the next couple of years. Because we'll talk about it later, but they have a lot of capacity that's coming online and time's running out for us. What do you think about all that?
Just the general disposition of Europe and how they're approaching all of this has been, they're still stuck in what we've been experiencing over the last 4 years, which is all of this DEI virtue signaling, and they've got their heads stuck up their asses as far as how to move forward. Essentially, their policies have stopped them from innovation because they can't get out from behind this idea that the outcomes are what matters now. And I think that Trump lifted a lot of that out of the government and is ultimately trying to clean house, remove the barriers. And so really you have China who never really cared about anything other than innovation and beating America. I mean, of course, they want to do what's best for their people, and that's great. And I think that's what they should do. At the end of the day, you want to have a country to rule, right? And the U.S., so I say best for their people, the best for them to stay in control of whatever it is that they're trying to control there. And then in the U.S., you have this idea that their potential adversary, and if we're going to go to war with them, that's not a positive. I think the best outcome would be that America and China and the world, ultimately, I think AI is going to be the catalyst for a future war, but then also future peace. I think that Europe is probably they're going to be the laggard just because of all this DEI and all of the issues they're facing around. They can't even get out of the concept of overregulation because that's just how they live. That's their paradigm.
Yeah, but do they need these data centers? If they can get models shipped over from China, like the data centers are in China, they get it from us, they get it from China. They play both sides of the coin. I mean, like there's a path for Europe to survive. They don't have to change their way of life. And I don't know if DEI is holding them back. I think it's environmental regulations on their energy sector because they want clean energy because they're more liberal than we are, frankly. And they're socialism. They're much more socialist than we are. I don't think it's necessarily as much DEI with them. I mean, Europeans are super fucking racist. So, maybe not as much as us. We could have a racism competition with them, maybe.
Sure.
But, and obviously the Chinese are super racist too. I mean, like everybody's racist. So it's like, DEI, whatever.
Yeah. I use DEI as a way to describe this whole like progressive left ideology where, we're trying to get everybody just to have the same values. But in order to do that, we have to dumb everybody down. We have to take away all their rights. We don't want you to think for yourself. And it's more of like this move, this shift towards the hive mind. And because of that, like they can't think of individualism, innovation, which is ultimately why they're going to have to rely on China, because innovation doesn't exist inside of those types of environments.
Well, they're not going to innovate, but I mean, they're still going to have their country, and they're going to get AI one way or another. They're either going to get it from us, get it from China. I think you're
Yeah.
conflating a lot of things under DEI, so I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. All right, so next topic that's interesting we can talk about is Google co-founder Eric Schmidt, who has kind of risen up as this American thought leader on national defense. This dude's rich as fuck. He's already had his career and everything. He understands technology, understands AI, and has been helping the government. Thank God. He was on this like AI National Security Commission a couple years ago. He's been advising the government at very highest levels, very respected. Everything I've seen him say is pretty much on point. He's not out there that much. I mean, he's not like on all the TV shows and everything, but he gives interviews every once in a while. He's advising the government. He's doing his part as a senior American, whatever. And so after this AI thing, I assume he was there. He said that we have to do something about open source in America because we're mostly closed source because all the Silicon Valley guys want to make money on it. Like OpenAI is like raking in cash.
Yeah, closed AI for sure.
When China came with this open source DeepSeek R1, they're fucking our shit up. And he's like, we got to do something quick because they're taking over. And then also, I really like Sam Altman. He's definitely not as manic and crazy as Elon Musk. He seems very sensible. He's an AI leader. He's very focused on AI. Elon's got 10 different things going on. He's sleeping on the floor in the new executive office building where the fuck he's at. Like, Sam Altman is like driving towards AGI. I don't like the fact that he's working with Microsoft, which I think is a really shitty company. But he's got to do what he's got to do. He responded to Elon Musk's troll. Elon Musk tried to buy OpenAI for like $97 billion, all cash, or like force them, play with their board, like force them to go nonprofit because they're competing with his XAI. They're backed up by Microsoft, so like that's not going to fly. They have as much money as they need. What do you think about Eric Schmidt and open source versus closed source?
The open source model has been around for a long time. Like in the 70s and 80s, that whole idea came to light like from the very beginning. So China's just taking advantage of something that's already out there, which the idea of open source in general has been a boon for technology because it allows the dissemination of information. And yeah, we're screwing up. It's not just our country, but how we've approached it. And a lot of that is thanks to, in my opinion, to the Biden administration, at least from what I heard from Mark Andreessen. From what I heard from Mark Andreessen, from Y Combinator is that, the Biden Kamala administration had an entire goal of just keeping like 2 or 3 major companies, giving them all the power. The government was going to deeply control the AI. And that goes counter to how AI even came into existence was through this advancement, right? And really, we could probably say that open source kind of facilitated that all through the last few decades. And ultimately what it's for, which in my opinion is the decentralization of information. Power has been kept tight in, it used to be dynasties and now it's in institutions and academia. And this is allowing you to have a PhD in your pocket. So I think Eric Schmidt is absolutely correct. Open source is the way. Of course, they're afraid of like homebrew war machines, right? Which are definitely possible. But the amount of people that are capable of doing that, not that it's not a risk, but as far as I've seen, it's a kind of a small population, and I don't think you're going to regulate it away anyway.
Last thing on Biden and Kamala, these people were about to give away the race. They're about to give away, not to mention the border and all that shit, just like the AI shit. They were letting China like run with this. Like they were setting us up to get fucked. If we didn't have Trump, I said it on the other one, if we didn't get Trump reversing this shit, we'd be fucked. And the CHIPS Act, they spend all this money on the CHIPS Act and all they're getting is 7-nanometer chips. They're not negotiating with TSMC. Trump comes in and he goes to Taiwan and he's like, you better start building 2-nanometer chips in Arizona. And TSMC changed their mind. And,
weird. we're that is the one, like him, love him, hate him. The one thing that Trump is very good at is understanding where all the leverage is and using that leverage to get what he thinks is best, or what he thinks his voter base is best, whatever whichever way you lean. He knows how to use leverage to get what he wants. And I want someone leading the way who knows how to use leverage, knows where to look for leverage, and then is using it, in my opinion, to the best advantage of the United States and the idea of democracy around the world. So,
yeah, we're going to bring democracy to the Gaza Strip, y'all.
Yeah. I'm hoping that's for strategic positioning,
Again.
but I don't. Yeah, again, we're going to make Gaza great again.
Yeah. Last topic, energy. We were just talking about before we started. Energy. There's not enough energy. We don't have the energy infrastructure. We don't have the energy generation because of regulations and whatever happened over the last couple of decades. China has so much more electrical generating power than we do. And also, they're making more steel. They're able to build data centers faster. They have more people, more engineers. This sucks for us, right? And so all the AI companies are trying to figure out how to get enough energy to power their data centers so that they can train these models. The long-term solution really is like nuclear reactors, but they can't really get these nuclear reactors online for like 5 years. And in 5 years, it's going to be over. So they're trying everything. They're buying old power plants. They're making propane power plants. They're getting portable generators. They're doing all of the above, anything they can do to feed power to these chips. And it's a big problem. So it's not just the chips and the expertise. We also need energy, which is kind of a new thing.
Yeah, well, I think that China is also helping solve that problem by producing models that don't require as much compute in order to run. So if you can run DeepSeek on a local PC, like, then do you need as much power? I think that's one way to think about the problem, which is, yeah, you can keep adding GPUs or graphics cards or whatever type of memory to the game and say, well, we need more power. This is true. But AI is likely going to help us solve that problem in the first place. As far as China versus the US, I think that, at the end of the day, we can look at this and say, okay, well, this is one advantage of having someone in power who can make unilateral decisions, because if they have the right goals, then all they have to do is sign a piece of paper, shake their head yes. Whereas in the US, we've allowed relativism to drive us off course for the last like almost 12, 16 years. And because of that, we've lost the advantage. But I think luckily our spirit of innovation in the United States should allow us to play catch up. The question is just, is it going to be fast enough?
Yeah, but if you have that one person in charge, if they go down the wrong path, then we're all fucked and no one can stop them. And it sets up a situation where they can be horribly corrupt because everybody's going to be trying to bribe them, jerk them off behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I'm not for that at all. Where I'm 100% for the decentralization of power and information, but we're definitely seeing, I mean, at the end of the day, if we're just looking at outcomes, they're leading the way and we've fallen behind. So, trade-offs.
Well, we're out of time for this. But it was great talking to you. First time on Real Veteran News. Real veteran Charles Sears, philosopher, learned man, entrepreneur extraordinaire. You have any final words?
No, thanks for inviting me on, John. This has been great, and just love what you're doing here on Real Veteran News and ultimately serving the community, our community, and just happy to be on, share my thoughts.
All right. Okay. Thanks for the kind words. All right.
All right, man. Talk soon.
All right, now it's time for the part of the show where we do a veteran debate of the big issues affecting veteran news in the military. This week, we've got Ted, Army Ranger buddy. How you doing, Ted?
Good to see you.
You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Ted, retired U.S. Army, 26 years active, and then a few more years working in Department of Defense, and then about 6 years contracting overseas.
All right, well, due to scheduling problems, we don't have a liberal veteran here today, so I'm going to fill in as the commie pinko liberal, and we're going to try to go do our back and forth here. First topic is Ukraine. Ted has elected to let me go first, so I'm going to start the clock, and I'll get going. All right, well, this kind of steps on what I was going to talk on for next week, but I basically think that we're at the end of the Ukraine war here. Trump obviously doesn't give a shit about what Zelensky has to say about it, and he's just going to negotiate directly with Putin. He can obviously bully Zelensky around. They're totally dependent on us. Putin is asking for the moon. He wants land that he doesn't control. He wants Ukraine disarmed. He wants everything, basically. But it is the beginning of negotiation. I do feel okay about Trump doing the negotiation. I don't really think it matters what Ukraine thinks about it, because they are not in a position of power. They're basically like our client state in this kind of proxy war between us and Russia. I don't really see anything good has coming out of it. And I think objectively, we have lost, spent a ton of money, and Putin has won, basically.
I agree. Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to agree, but I agree it is proxy war based on dollar figures. I mean, when you look at the U.S. contribution to sustaining the Ukrainians versus the European Union and NATO being the part of NATO that's not the U.S., it is our war. We've paid for it. And either we need to double the amount of money we're giving them, triple it, or we need to find an out. We can't go on just nickel and diming. Besides that, I think Russia's proven they can take the beating they've been taking, and they're going to continue to take. They're assaulting Ukrainian positions in golf carts, and their people are still for the war. So that says a lot. What does Zelensky have to say? He hasn't won the war. He hasn't lost the war. He's just kind of taken our money and continued.
Yeah, so I do think, it's kind of like a sellout of Ukraine. I don't know if there was much point in dragging it out so long. I think the only good things that have come out of it are the fact that we learned about the vulnerability of our high dollar weapon systems. We learned about what the future battlefield is going to look like with the drone warfare that is now prevalent, at least in this battlefield and probably in every future battlefield. Once the AI comes, it's going to be even worse. I don't know. I think Biden and them just did a terrible job. I think he's super old. He was locked in an old way of thinking. The Europeans are obviously scared. Like you said, Russia can take a beating. They've got the biggest population in Europe. They don't care about losing their people. They've got control of the information in their country. So they basically are not going to have any kind of anti-war resistance coming from them. And they'll just keep throwing bodies at the problem, just like they did in World War II, and they overran the Germans.
Yep. And I lived in Europe for 10 years. So I've seen the European Union. I've seen NATO. I've seen what a drain they are on the U.S. So not a big fan. We told them 10 years ago, you need to stop buying oil from the Russians. You need to stop buying natural gas. It's all going into their military. And here they are. They're dealing with it. And we have a say. I mean, Biden had 3 years to win the war, and he didn't. Come on, we gave him, 50, not even 50, like 30 M1s. We've got thousands of those things parked all over the place. And we're saying that's all we can spare. Come on. And NATO's proven that their industrial complex can't keep up with a war for the second or third time. The same thing happened in Libya. We had to give them bombs so they could win that war. And now we're giving them artillery so they can just sustain the war. I say either win it or get the hell out of it.
One thing that we've totally proven is that our generals are fucking idiots. They mess with the Ukrainian strategies. The Ukrainians should have been on defense the entire time. They're killing about 10 Russians or so for every Ukrainian that dies when they're on defense. But they put all their armor material together. They did their great Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023, which was the NATO generals, the American generals, and their war games telling them that they could make it work when they never could. NATO is basically just a weapons buying club, and we've been trying to induct these Eastern European countries into it so we can sell more weapons, and that's what pissed Russia off and started this whole fucking thing. So whether it's all his fault or it's not all his fault, it's not all our fault.
I mean, we need somebody to blame. That's how wars work in the U.S. When you lose one, you have to find somebody to blame. But I do think we had several opportunities that we could have offensively changed the course of the war, that we allowed the Russians months and months and months to prepare their defense before the big Ukrainian counterattack, which was not well supplied. They didn't have everything they needed. And then we tried to make them use Western tactics, which they don't have air superiority. We haven't fought a war in 80 years where we didn't have complete air superiority over the battlefield. And we tried to use that tactic.
Yeah, it's all fucked up. All right. So that's the end of that topic. All right, that was great. Next topic is the DOGE action in Washington, D.C. that everyone's talking about. They're stealing all the spotlight, cutting workers, going after the fraud, waste, and abuse that's rampant and causing national crisis, apparently. Ted's going to go first on this one, and you get started.
With the DOGE and with the individuals involved, I think My thought is let's wait and see where it goes. Yeah, they've overturned the apple cart. They've upset everybody, but they've only been at it for a couple of weeks, actively at it. I don't think this is something that was spontaneous on the 21st of January. I think it's something that's been in discussion and planning for months and months and months, probably before the election. With everything that's going on, I think we're going to have to wait and see what the outcome is versus all the media uproar about, oh, they're hurting the homeless, they're hurting the veterans, they're hurting the elderly. A lot of that racket, no one ever talks about cutting welfare. It's always let's cut Social Security, or it's going to hurt Social Security. Now it's going to hurt the veterans. Now it's going to hurt, et cetera. Let's wait and see what's going to happen.
I think you're right. I think we have to wait and see. It's got to shake out and everything. I do think they're talking a lot of shit and just basically mining the government for things to talk shit about online, obviously misrepresenting, like condoms in Gaza, this dumb shit. They are not actually going to do much in general. They're hacking. They're saying they're going after fraud, waste, and abuse, but they're basically just hacking up all the parts of the government that the liberals like, which is subjective. From their frame, this green climate energy stuff is good. The DEI stuff is good. It's not necessarily fraud, waste, and abuse. There's obviously, we all know in the government there are certain things that are abuse or whatever, but like the vast majority of the government is Medicare, Social Security, and like the core Defense Department budget. They're going to be able to clean up things around the edges a little bit, but there's not any national emergency or crisis that makes it so that they have to do this immediately. And then Elon Musk has to be sleeping on the floor every night. They have to be going at this pace willy-nilly. There's no crisis here, and they're just making dumb cuts, basically.
I am following it. I think a lot of it is almost circus more than it is anything else for the media, which, oh, by the way, our media makes money off of views. The number of views a big news source gets is more money from advertising, more money from et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to say what's accurate and what's not. I am just watching to see where it's going to go. Do I think the government has too many employees? Absolutely. There's too many bureaucrats. Do I think the VA could take a hit on bureaucrats? Absolutely. I use the VA, and for every one person that actually sees a veteran and helps as a practitioner, there's probably 3 that are bureaucrats that do nothing but take up office space.
I think they've done a really good job of capturing the conversation and talking a lot of shit on the news, as I said. But in reality, at the most, they'd be able to cut maybe 1-2% of the budget. The fact that not you, but the fact that people think that these guys are geniuses. First off, all the people that work for them, they got interns that they got off chat rooms and stuff. And they might be bright or young, but they don't know anything about the government. And the way that you would do something like this is you get professional auditors to go in, do a thorough audit, come up with a plan, implement that plan over time. You don't just like barge into some place and fire everyone. I mean, they're not even taking into account who these people are, what role they have. They're just like, oh, who are the easiest people for us to fire? Fire them all. Like, they don't even know who these people are, whether they're talented or not, whether they're doing a good job or not. It's just like reduction in force. And they just think that basically everybody in the government is interchangeable, basically.
And, I've been through some government downsizing. And when I was going through it, the government didn't want to call it that. They wanted to call it right sizing, which I thought was hilarious because they just came up with another term to add to the book of terms that make it look like something other than what it is. And they more or less, this was in 2012, I think, 2012 or 2013. We actually just deleted all the vacant slots. So every vacant slot on our books that didn't have somebody sitting in it were just deleted, whether we needed them or not. And then everybody,
I mean, if it's vacant, whatever. But, it just shows that they don't have a strategy, right? They're like, anyone in the CIA who wants to quit, you can quit and you get paid or whatever. They're hacking through the FBI, these people, just because they worked on January 6th. Maybe somebody got told to work on January 6th. They didn't want to, or they didn't care or whatever, but like they're high talent, good person or whatever. I mean, these are just dumb cuts and they're not geniuses. And there's no reason why they need to happen with such speed and rapidity. They just want to make it hurt. They just want to capture the spotlight. And just the fact that they go on Twitter and just are talking shit every single day, it just shows that all they care about is their own personal persona and making noise, basically, when they're not actually going to make an impact on anything unless they start digging into Social Security or Medicare, or there'll be riots, essentially, if they do that. All right, well, that wraps up the DOGE topic. Probably repeating some of the stuff I said at the beginning of the show, but I'm pinch hitting here. All right, so the next topic is Pete Hegseth. And he went to NATO last week, and he's been making changes in the military and kind of getting his feet wet in the Department of Defense. This one, I'm going to go first, so I'll get started here. All right, so Pete Hegseth went to NATO. Don't think that he looked that great. He's obviously a good speaker. I don't think that he is super intelligent. I don't think he's a very intelligent, strategic military thinker. I just saw a YouTube video of him, and he's like, I spent 2 years talking to all these military people about their complaints about the military and put it into my book. So he basically just listened to a bunch of military people complain and then wrote a book, and even if he wrote the book or whatever. But he wore like a weird suit. He didn't fit in. He didn't fit in with the Europeans. He gave his cowboy speech, kind of just like J.D. Vance did, tried to impress Donald Trump. And then the National Review editor guy wrote the op-ed saying that he did amateur bungling when he said that Ukraine couldn't be part of NATO. And then Trump's like, oh, I have to negotiate. And so he told him to walk it back. And so he had to say, sorry, all options are on the table.
I actually didn't watch the speech. I did read about his trip and Vance's trip. I had to laugh at the left because there was an article from the left that said free speech is what led to the Holocaust. It's kind of like, all right, they've just lost me on that one. But with Hegseth not being qualified, I mean, he's less than a month into the job. We've got to give the guy a little bit more time. The same people that are screaming he's not qualified are the same people that thought Harris was qualified to be the president of the United States, and so on and so on. But give the guy a little bit of time. I don't personally think he will be the Secretary of Defense this time next year. I think he was put in to shake things up, to do a lot of dirty work, and he's probably not going to last. And he'll be replaced by somebody who's way more qualified.
I do think the next person is going to be way more qualified, although he might be in there for 4 years or whatever. Who knows? I mean, he's not going to want to leave, obviously, because this is a great opportunity for him. Whether he's qualified or not, he's a younger guy. I mean, he had his brand, and he wasn't taking things seriously before because he was just like this Fox News guy, and then Trump blessed him with this. The main thing I don't like about him is he's not doing anything about AI. He is just focused on this DEI stuff, which I get it. The culture of the military is fucked up and there's a lot of stuff, but it's like he does this DEI stuff, but then he's too much of a coward to do anything about the women in combat because obviously he doesn't agree with that. And then he goes and, sucks up to all these people and pretends like he supports that. So he's kind of fake in my opinion too.
I guess in the long term, again, we'll see. We're still 3 days away from Trump's first month in office. And with a lot of the nominees, they're 2 weeks, 1 week, less than that. I'm not defending the guy. I'm just saying my jury is going to be out for a little bit longer. I agree there's bigger issues that we could focus on. But then again, if he was focused on the new PT test or the uniform or something, everybody would say, oh, he needs to focus on DEI. That's more important. I guess when everything is important, what is important? They chose DEI because that was a big hot button during the election. When that's over with, the transgender's over with, all that, I think we'll probably move on to something else. But I do agree that there are some things that we need to focus on that are more important than if a man in the Army wears a dress.
What he needs to be focused on is quality of life. And they have gotten the recruitment bump. I mean, obviously people didn't want to join Biden's military and so on, but it's like one of the first policies they put out was the Air Force nail polish policy of what colors of nail polish girls could wear in the Air Force. And it's like, who gives a fuck what color nail polish these girls wear in the Air Force? Like, we all realized that tattoo policy was stupid, kept people out of the military or just like persecuted people who like tattoos. And it doesn't matter if he goes around like putting up Instagram videos of him doing PT with the SF troop or whatever. Like, who gives a shit? He needs to be focused on the real stuff. That's it. For me.
I'll sum it up with a buddy of mine I talked to that lives up in North Carolina. He lives near Fort Bragg, the newly minted Fort Bragg, which is not named after Braxton Bragg, the Confederate general. He said, I really don't care what we call the base as long as the toilet's flush and the barracks don't have mold in them. But a lot of what we're doing right now is just so the left can't come out and say, well, he's not doing what he said he was going to do in the election or during the campaign to the election. So, yeah, it's a lot for show, bread and circus.
Yeah. Yes, it'd be nice if they would focus on the hardcore stuff. That was great discussion. Thanks a lot, Ted. You got any final words?
No, all good.
All right, great. Thanks again. And next time we'll try to get the 2-person debate up here. So that's Real Veteran News for this week. Thanks a lot.